We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP.
Welcome back to Security and Compliance Weekly. Hey, Security Weekly Unlocked will be held in person this December 5th through 7th at the Hilton Lake Buena Vista. That's in Florida, in case you didn't know. We're excited to announce our first round of speakers, who includes Leslie Carhart, David Kennedy, Alyssa Miller, O'Shea Bowens, Marina Ciabatta, Patrick Coble, Chris Eng, Eric Escobar, Nick Leghorn, Michael Schlatt, Kevin Johnson, and Justin Kohler. SecurityWeekly.com/unlocked is where you go to register, and you can check out the complete schedule as it evolves and emerges. All right. Also, of course, if you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts or technical trainings, they're available for your viewing pleasure at any time. SecurityWeekly.com/on-demand. All right. So many questions. Where to start? So, Scott, before the break, you had framed a question. Can you briefly restate it, and we'll start there?
Well, so recently, as in 6-7 days ago, something that wasn't widely covered by mainstream media was that the White House is actually tasking NIST with producing another cybersecurity framework. And
that is not the question you asked.
Well, hold on. I'm going to get there. You got to give me a second, because it deals with compliance, and it deals with what we're talking about today, right? So from the article, the White House's inclusion of insurance companies in Wednesday's meeting suggests the agreement with the Solarium Commission's recommendations around the role insurers can play on improving security. This issue has been controversial, with federal contractors pushing back on what they've perceived as efforts to mandate cyber insurance policies. And in fact, Resilience announced that it will look to fulfill the security role of insurers by, quote, requiring policyholders to meet a threshold of cybersecurity best practices as a condition for receiving coverage. Now, in the past on our show here, if you've followed along since the beginning, we've had a real love-hate relationship with cyber insurance, and particularly cyber insurance companies, right? We still have an open call to any company that feels that they want to come on and talk about cyber insurance. However, today we're talking about PCI. So my question is do you feel that PCI is the end all be all for companies? Like, if a company that is not dealing with credit cards wants to be PCI compliant, is that something that they should look for? Or do you feel that the addition of PCI policy framework inside of what insurance is pushing will help get us across the finish line?
So is that a question for Christopher or me?
That was a question for everybody.
Okay. Christopher, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think, I read something recently, too, that a lot of cyber insurance companies are looking for. And actually, we have cyber insurance as a company. But one of the questions was, are we PCI compliant? And so for us, it was a matter of, like, we don't have a product yet. We're not taking any payments yet. So right now it was a matter of no. But I think of adding that framework in regards to things, I don't think it would hurt anything. But because everybody takes payments. Everybody takes credit cards of some sort at some magnitude, whether you're level 1, level 4. I don't know. Thoughts?
Well, I have thoughts. I saw the announcement earlier this week about the tasking for a new framework, and I was like, woohoo, that's all we need is another framework. I think frameworks are very much like religious denominations and sects. They're all checkbox exercises in trying to find the right set of rules to follow so that you can feel good about yourself and feel okay.
I'm terribly sorry, Jeff, but if you have a checklist for sex, we need to have a little chat, okay?
SECTS. Sex.
What you're really saying is that it's more work for the
denominations. Essentially. But I mean, my attitude is essentially, if you look at the PCI data security standard and actually its contents, not the way it's implemented and enforced or not enforced, as the case may be, but if you actually just sit down and look at it as a set of security best practices, or dare I say as a framework, I think any company in the land would benefit from following those rules. And I have conversations with naysayers all the time about PCI, and I boil it down to, what in the PCI doesn't make sense, what is obsolete, what should be done more that's not covered by PCI, and usually the response is specific to a technology. To which I respond, yes, but if you treat this as a framework, and if you think of this security requirement, although it's attempted to have been written in a sort of a sort of a technology agnostic way, there's certain things that are, do better at that than others. But if you step back and say, what's the goal? What's the objective of this security requirement? And does that extend to whatever technology we're talking about? Usually the answer is yes. And then my question is simply, okay, how do you do it? How do you meet that objective? How do you meet that goal of this particular security requirement, even though it might be written a little bit archaically or with a different type of topology or architecture or framework in mind? How do you meet the goal? So long-winded answer, but the short answer is yeah. Any company would benefit from following PCI data security standard. I don't think we need other frameworks, but there's organizations out there that have to feel good about themselves and feel like they're making progress, so they come up with something new and different and say, everybody go follow this now. And companies are frustrated that they have so many different compliance frameworks and regulatory frameworks and compliance standards that they have to follow. We get it from our customers all the time. Can we reuse our SOC 2 findings? Can we reuse our ISO findings? Can we reuse our HIPAA high trust findings? Because we've just gone through the same exercise, answered the same questions, and now we got to do it again for you guys. I hear that all the time.
That's a really astute point. That's a really astute point. Why are we coming out with new frameworks and new guidance when we're having trouble implementing what we already have?
Oh man, not to digress too much, a friend of mine, I don't know how many of you know her. She's been on the main show before, Chris Kubeka. She's Sec Evangelism on Twitter. She posted a question over the weekend. I should look it up and quote it correctly. But she basically said, what's the biggest, darkest secret that scares you the most about cybersecurity? And boy, did that unleash a Pandora's box of responses, and I haven't read through all of them, but what most people were saying, if there were themes emerging, it was that everything's broken, nobody cares, we know the answers as security people, but nobody's listening. We're still running down the same problems that plagued us 25, 30 years ago. Why haven't all the trillions of dollars that have been spent and all the investments that have been made a difference when we're still, we used to have a T-shirt. It's in my closet somewhere. Paul Security Weekly. We drink because you don't change your default passwords. PCI is not
Jeff,
much more.
I feel like you're saying the geek version of Soylent Green is people.
Something like that. Anyway, I could go on and on, but we've got lots of questions to cover. There was a question that, or a discussion topic that came out on the Discord where Dimitri was pointing out, in case you didn't know it, if you have a credit card or a debit card, that credit card number, all that payment card information, all the data on it, technically that does not belong to you, the consumer. It belongs to your bank. And I read it in a EULA agreement when you used to get your credit cards with the little very, very fine print papers. There was 3 or 4 pages that nobody ever reads, but I actually read it once, and I think it might say on the cards themselves somewhere on the back, if lost, return to the bank, this card is the property of the bank, something like that. But payment card information, generically speaking, is not PPI. If you can track it back to a bank account, maybe, but the credit cards are owned by the banks that issued them. They're not yours, the consumers. Why does that make a difference? Because when they're stolen, the people that get irritated about it are obviously us, the consumers, that have to get a new card and replace all our account numbers in all the different places. But we don't necessarily have a recourse in terms of litigation, although I'd be interested in getting your perspective on that, Priya, because certainly there have been large-scale breaches in the past where there have been states' attorneys general that have gotten together and come up with settlements and fines and recurring costs and all the like. Hopefully, Dimitri, I got that point across for you. I did appreciate that you added that to the Discord. But let's get back to Christopher. So Christopher, we have these collective problems that there's a lot of lack of information, attention, and focus in the small merchant space. What do you think we can do about it? I mean, I have my ideas, but I mostly drink a lot and think that we're all screwed at the end of the day. But enlighten us. What are some things that can be done to change the state?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just like small businesses don't know or understand. So there's 3 reasons why people don't do things: don't know, don't understand, don't care. I believe small businesses do care in regards to wanting to protect their customers' information. They want to stay secure, but they don't know how to, and they don't really understand what needs to be done. Same thing goes true for the agents that are selling processing. Most of us, we care about our clients. We want them to do well, right? I mean, that's how we're compensated, based on residuals. So I think a lot of it has to go back into training, right? And if the processors aren't going to train us properly in regards to how to help our merchants with PCI, then it's our job as the ISOs to seek out that training. Now, you asked a question earlier prior to the break if I've had any formal training in regards to things. And the only formal training I've had is I'm a qualified integrator and reseller. And that's the only certification that I've gotten. And other than that, I've read the entire website for PCI, right? Backwards and forwards, read through SAQs and tried to and sought out people like you and some others just to fire off questions and to try to learn more. But I think it goes back to training, and merchants believe what we tell them, no matter what. I mean, we could tell them there's no contract, but I mean, and then we put a contract in place, right? But
so on that, let me interrupt you real quick on that note, because I've got a couple sort of real world scenarios with customers right now, and you're speaking to one. So I have a customer right now that is a service provider seeking PCI compliance, but they're almost like an ISO. They're providing PCI compliant solutions for their mostly B2B customers. So they're like, we can make your PCI burden go away if you use one of these point-to-point encryption solutions. At a very broad stroke, that's what they're offering. I go to their website and let me put this in the form of a question to you. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the account number, the 16 digits that appear on a credit card, is technically called a PAN. Maybe I should ask this for Priya, Scott, or Josh first. Do you guys have any idea what PAN actually stands for? Well, Christopher, hold off on number. Personal account number. Scott?
No.
No. Priya, any wager at what PAN stands for?
Personal area network.
I think it's Spanish for bread.
Sounds good.
Final answer.
Christopher, I'm putting you on the spot. What does PAN actually stand for?
Primary account number.
Okay. Primary account number. Not a huge difference, but this particular customer that I have on their website, they had it listed the way you had said, Josh, as personal account number. Okay. But they're a company that should know what they're talking about. It's kind of like a HIPAA thing, HIPPA, in my opinion.
No, it's HIPAA.
Exactly.
No. Well, look, it depends. If you're talking about a female hippo, it's HIPPA.
What I'm talking about is a company that's in the business of providing PCI compliance solutions to make your PCI compliance go away or to ease your burden, all to know what the basic terminology actually means. Otherwise, I hold suspect any of their other claims. Fair?
Yeah.
But it goes to what you were saying, Christopher, that those types of organizations aren't really getting the training. They're not certified necessarily. Because I used to think vendors just simply lied, and then I started.
I think ISOs for the most. I think ISOs for the most part believe the same lie that merchants have been told, that PCI is a once a year thing. They don't realize that it's an ongoing journey. It's an ongoing process. It's not a, one time we're done. And I think that's what agents and a lot of processors understand. But it goes back to training. They're not properly trained.
Right.
And what we're doing, or at least what we're trying to do, is we're trying to, start that re-educating. And I mean, we've got a group that we talk to on LinkedIn with a few other ISOs and so forth, and just sharing information in regards to saying, hey, this is what we need to do. If we truly want to help our merchants, it's better to help them, put them in the right situation and do our due diligence as processors, because even a lot of ISOs out there, you hit it on the head earlier. You said P2PE, point-to-point encrypted terminals. A lot of ISOs advertise for a point-to-point encrypted terminal, but then you go to reference it back to, is it PCI validated? And it's not. So You're selling an end-to-end encrypted terminal, which opens up the scope for which SAQ or questionnaire they should take.
Right. So to try to translate very quickly to the people that aren't PCI conversant, P2PE stands for point-to-point encryption, and it's a label that the PCI Council gives for payment solutions that go through a certification and a validation process that basically validate that encryption happens as soon as you present your card. Tap it, dip it, swipe it, and it's happening within the firmware of that card reader payment, that card reading device, and it's supposedly done in such a way that it's not in memory, so you can't intercept or recover the keys, and the merchant certainly has no access to the decryption keys. But basically, as soon as the card data is presented, it's encrypted, and throughout the whole payment authorization process, it's encrypted data that the merchant can't decrypt. Therefore, they get to call it not cardholder data. Therefore, they are largely not subject to all of the PCI requirements. It's a huge thing in the PCI business to be able to, and we call it in the vernacular, de-scoping, or taking things out of scope. You don't have to do antivirus. You don't have to do file integrity monitoring. You don't have to have logs activated and capture them and review them. You don't have to have a firewall. You don't have to have segmentation. You don't have to have secure development, code development. There's so many things that you don't have to do because they consider the data to have been devalued because they assume that you can't steal it and ever decrypt it. And that's all based on the encryption happens as soon as the card is introduced, and it happens in firmware, not in memory. And that's validated and certified, and you get to be listed on the PCI website. Now, if you're not doing that, but you're doing mostly all of that, or all of that, but you haven't been certified, it falls to the bucket of end-to-end encryption, which encapsulates that plus anything that's done in memory, anything that's done in any different way, shape, or form. And unfortunately, there's a certain amount of allowance in our industry for using systems that encrypt but haven't necessarily been validated to be P2PE worthy. So all the assumptions have not been proven or demonstrated, and yet they still are allowed to use it. I have another case in point right now. I have a merchant customer that is claiming we don't have to do much of PCI. The scope reduction is in place because we use a P2PE solution that some ISO or QIR installed for them and said, yep, it's capable. It can do all this stuff. And I've been working with them for weeks trying to figure out if what they're using actually does the encryption, actually is a P2PE solution.
Jeff, we can talk offline in regards to it. Me and my co-owner for proven PCI, we've figured out a way to test the terminals to see if they're actually, if the P2P encryption is actually turned on in the terminal or not.
That would be great, because I'm pulling what's left of my hair out trying to figure out how to prove that a device is actually doing encryption. And what scares me the most is I've been a customer. I've gone through and made a purchase, and the authorization pops in less than a second. And I'm like, man, this is either the most kick-ass system out there, or there isn't encryption happening. Because most of us know that when there's encryption,
it could be a force authorization as well.
There's a lag. It could be, but
a lot of those systems that I've found actually have a thing where if they can't get through, it'll just do a force authorization, which is a horrible thing.
It's a business decision, but and it doesn't mean that there isn't encryption happening on the back end, but it's moving people through the line quicker. I get that. I'm looking for, okay, what else is happening here? Because it was fast, even from the perspective of, I'm sure we've all experienced the chip. We have a chip card now, and you stick it in, and it takes a couple seconds.
There's about a 3-second delay in regards to it.
For the chip to do its thing. Yeah, it's been fast even for that. Which actually, Josh, was an indicator that, okay, there's something happening here that they're authorizing. Going through all the
agreed entirely. It's wrong. I just was talking about why it might be wrong. That's all. But you're 100% right, man.
Fair enough. Anyway.
So one of the go ahead, sorry, Jeff.
No, please, Scott.
No, I was going to say, one of the bigger issues that we see across the entire industry, and not just PCI, is the control testing frequency. Do you guys foresee us having to do more tests? Right now, what's the requirement for let's just say pen testing for right now? What's the requirement in 3.2?
It's 3.2.1.
17 times a year.
Annual penetration testing, internally and externally, and after any significant change to your environment.
Please define significant change. Thank you.
Nope.
Josh, you beat me to it.
Nope.
If we as an industry started testing more frequently than just once a year, there are multiple compliance regimes that require at least once a year, but if we move to a quarterly model, would that be better?
Are you looking for an answer? I want to quote DMZ, who put up on the Discord. I love this. We're trying to get DMZ on the show, by the way, hopefully before the end of the year. In or out of scope doesn't mean you shouldn't do good security. Thank you, DMZ. That's what I tell my clients all the time. We want to de-scope something. I'm like, why? What basic security control aren't you doing here that you should be doing anyway? Let's talk. Absolutely.
Well, I guess the two questions are, to Scott's half rhetorical question, well, what if you did all those things and it was you're moderately secure? Is that enough? From the Visa standard? And then the second, Jeff's question, when you talk to the client, we're going to say that's the end user, the mom and pop shop, the small law firm, the whatever. I guess the question you want to ask people is, what do you gain by doing that, aside from saving a little money? And if they can't give you any other answer, then they have a problem, right?
Who's supposed to answer? Christopher, take a shot at. This is your interview.
What do they gain? For a small mom and pop shop, I think the biggest thing is, they just don't want to see that non-compliance fee on their statement. It's the biggest thing that they're looking for, right? And I think that's the hard part, is to demonstrate of what they gain by securing their business. You can argue the fact that they're securing their reputation, but the hard thing that I found in regards to even development is finding any statistics out there regarding small, medium business breaches, right? Or just because they're not compliant, has anything bad happened? And so finding that data is dang near impossible. So to try to convey that to a small business owner as to why maybe a small business, their neighbor closed down their doors, I think that's the biggest thing that we struggle with, is trying to share the importance of being PCI compliant, because at the end of the day, they don't care why they do or don't have to do PCI compliant. They just want to get that non-compliance fee off their statement.
So you can't quantify the harm for them because the data is not available, and it's so widely and unevenly distributed that
it is so misrepresented in regards to the industry. The dissemination of or inaccurate information on the web is astounding. I think we all know of a payment provider that's out there, and it says, we make you PCI compliant. Well, or we make you PCI compliant, or we make it easier, or even the simple phrase of, we're PCI compliant, so therefore you're PCI compliant. I mean, I had a potential vendor that I was working with, and he said we inherited from the provider, and that's and he's a CISO. That was the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, I've definitely learned over the last couple of years that it's much more an issue of, by definition, ignorance. People just don't know, and if they're doing phone sales, trying to sell a point of sale system for a slightly smaller cost, there's, of course, I see this in all of cybersecurity vendor space. Really, they're reading from a script, they're using words that are the buzzwords. But Priya, I think you're picking up on the fact that ultimately it's a dollar and cents type of thing, and because it's an unknown, unquantifiable kind of risk for most companies, not even small merchants, they kind of default to, okay, well, let's spend as little as possible. So what do we have to do minimally to make this all go away and make it not be a problem? And then it only becomes a problem when there is a breach and there is an issue.
Well, I think before we beat people up for just being, Luddites and ignorant in only this area, what we're talking about could be said of basically almost any field, right? If you talk about the cost of healthcare and try to quantify the cost of eating junk food, right? It doesn't seem like anything to the person who's having the chalupa at Taco Bell or supersizing something, but
or the chocolate milkshake I've been wanting ever since you brought up Shake Shack. Shake Shack,
I know, right? With the fries. But if you step back and you're the person in the actuarial field looking at the cost to society of those junk food choices, right? It's the same thing. It's just like an ignorance on a micro and macro level of the impact of this behavior. And because I think society has sort of absorbed and distributed the cost of everyone's ignorance, it's hard to explain to the one person that what you do matters, right? And we could say that in healthcare, in the cost of insurance, we could say it in the cost of environmental things, all of it. People have a very hard time understanding the micro versus macro impact of their tiny choices in their tiny worlds. So just, Jeff, it makes you feel better. I think people are ripping their hair out everywhere. You're not alone.
No, but I think what you just said is profoundly true. And you should drop the microphone and let's move on. But I wanted to touch back very briefly on one of your first questions, Priya, where you were trying to describe different types of shops that you frequent, in New York City, in Manhattan, and just sort of underscore the complexity of all of this, because you said you go to a one-off coffee shop, and we assume that that's a small mom and pop shop, and then you mentioned Starbucks. Starbucks, as an example, is a large corporate entity, but they also, I believe, and I could be mistaken on this, set me straight, somebody, they probably rely on a franchise model. So the Starbucks on every corner of the 6 blocks closest to you may be owned by a single company that is a franchisor. And if they're not franchises, I'm just using this as an example. I don't know specifically whether Starbucks do this or not, but a franchise model is very different because you've got this, nationally, if not internationally recognized brand name, but you have an individual merchant that owns maybe 3 or 4 or 6 Starbucks locations, and they themselves, because the merchant levels are determined by the volume of transactions, not the dollar value, but how many Visa cards transactions do you take in a year? How many MasterCard transactions do you take in a year? Visa, this is the way I remember it. Visa, for a level 1 merchant status, Visa requires 6 million transactions a year, and Visa owns roughly 60% of the credit card market. So I always extrapolate to, if you're taking 10 million credit cards a year total, which most companies know roughly how many transactions they're processing, you're probably a level 1 merchant, and it goes down from there. But the franchise model is a little bit different. I've done a lot of work with gas stations over the years where they're kind of like a franchise model. Think Shell, Exxon, pick your brand. The major brands, they have something similar to a franchise model, but it's different, and it's different because in the world of PCI, a merchant has a merchant identification number, a merchant ID, and that's sort of what kicks all this whole process off. You're a merchant, you have an ID, how many transactions are you taking, and it goes from there. If you're a franchise, you have your own merchant ID. So even though you have the nationally or internationally named brand, you really are legitimately a small merchant. Corporate entities like Starbucks struggle with how do they get all their little guys to be compliant. In the gas station space, the franchises, and that's not what they call them, typically operate under the same merchant ID as the parent company. So it's a little bit different than most franchise models. It goes on and on like that. I could go on for days about the complexities and the one-offs of this, but the bottom line is small companies, small organizations don't have budget, don't have infrastructure. They're looking for a way to perhaps do the right thing, perhaps make it go away, perhaps just make the most responsible fiscal decision, which is a financial risk-based decision so that they can stay in business. I do want to give, Christopher, you a few moments to just very briefly tease us, tell us about what's behind your company and Proven PCI. What are you trying to do? What are you trying to tackle here? Give us a little bit of hope and let us do the investigating. But tell us a little bit about what your company's trying to do.
Yeah, so being in the payments industry, like I said earlier, for 16 years, I've had to walk clients through a number of their SAQs and identifying the proper questionnaire. And most businesses just know that they take payments. They don't know if it's a point of sale. They don't know if it's a standalone terminal. They don't know how they're taking payments via e-commerce or anything like that. One of what our solution will do, it'll actually predefine the proper questionnaire because we believe that's done from a processor standpoint, not the merchant shouldn't have to self-identify. Currently, they have to go through, anywhere between 10 to 30 questions to identify the proper questionnaire. And they're, again, just checking a box. So if they just check one, it's going to pull up one questionnaire. And so I think that's one avenue that it's being improperly done. So we're going to kind of automate that piece. And then the second part is we're putting all the tools in one box, right? So all the requirements that they would need to meet PCI compliance, we're going to try to automate it and map it back to the actual SAQ. So our goal is to automate PCI compliance, but then also continuously run it, because it isn't just a once and done. If I do PCI today on August 31st, I could be out of compliance tomorrow because we installed the new software. So we want to make sure that it's continuously running. So that is the goal. Currently, we're building out for e-commerce, and we're building it out for that platform because it is low-hanging fruit. Working with ISOs, and we should be launching for our beta testing by fourth quarter. So,
gotcha. Appreciate that. Your website?
It's provenpci.com.
Okay. Now, I think there's definitely huge gains to be made by helping small merchants through the process. I mean, I've been doing PCI since 2004, which is when it was published. And I look at the currently 9 different versions of self-assessment questionnaire. There used to be only one. There's now 9 versions. And I get confused. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I have often wondered how any small merchant or their ISO or their QIR, whoever's telling them, yeah, you need to do something, makes intelligent, right choices of picking which questionnaire to fill out. We could explain that. We'll do that another time. If anybody has questions, certainly you can ask. But we should probably wrap up. I appreciate, Christopher, you coming on and helping me to vent and share a little bit in the frustration of there's so much more that could be done in this industry if the ultimate goal is to try to help companies be secure as they need to be. So I would encourage our listeners, if you have any kind of remote, tangential interest in PCI, you work for an organization that's a small organization, but you think you might be doing PCI and might need some help, please go check out Christopher's site. Christopher, please keep in touch, and maybe we'll have you back on sometime, and you can tell us huge success stories a year or so down the road. But
definitely appreciate the opportunity.
Great. And so that's going to wrap for us today. Just as a show note, I think we're off next week because it's the holiday week, and we typically, at least this year, are taking those weeks off from most of the shows, at least this show. So we won't be back again until whatever the Tuesday is after that, which I think will be after 9/11. So I don't know if any of you guys if it's on your radar screen with all the stuff happening in Afghanistan the last month or so, but we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So take some time to pause and reflect on that in the intervening weeks. We're actually talking to a gentleman when we come back named Jim Henderson, who is founder and chairman of the National Insider Threat Special Interest Group. So I assume we're going to be talking about insider threat. We might be able to weave a little bit of reflection on 9/11 into that conversation. You never know. But at any rate, enjoy your Labor Day weekend. Enjoy the wind down to summer. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Stay safe, stay secure, stay compliant. Keep asking questions and keep seeking answers. That's going to wrap for us today.